My name is Erika Elkady. I'm a Dutch citizen, in case you wonder what the accent is all about. I've been the head of secondary at Jumeira Baccalaureate School for the past 7 years. And I think it's important to know the context of the school a little bit. We are a relatively small school with 850 students from 65 different nationalities, but approximately 35% of our students are Emirati. And that is important to know because when we look at the data from the Dubai Student Wellbeing Census, as well as the past data, it explains why we see certain patterns which you may not see in all schools in Dubai, of course, depending on the student population. So we were invited by the KHDA to participate in the Dubai Student Wellbeing Census trial, which was in May of 2017. It was totally new to us. We had very little information. All we were told was that students from grade 5, 6, 7, and 8 were expected to participate. We got instructions on how to administer the census, and that was more or less it. We got, in a relatively short period of time, because there were 19 trial schools at the time, so in a relatively short period of time, we did get the data from the KHDA. It's important to understand why Dubai and the KHDA focuses on this trial and why they consider it so important. And that is because of the happiness agenda in this country. Sheikh Mohammed has appointed a minister of happiness, and as you know, there is even a happiness street here in Dubai. And there is a real understanding that in order for students to do well academically, their well-being is actually at the forefront. And so Dr. Abdullah Al-Karam has said a couple of times, and I like to quote him here, is that, it's our job as educators to prepare students for the test of life and not a life of tests. And I think that this does not only apply here in Dubai and in the UAE, but this is something that is important for school children and university students as well, that their well-being is very much their main concern before actually the learning can take place. And so the people of the South Australian government who built the census, and they worked very closely with the Institute of Positive Education, which is the Geelong Grammar School in Australia. And they were actually starting to implement 10 years ago positive education. And positive education came from a movement led by Martin Seligman in the United States, which was all about positive psychology, and that was important first before people can function well. So that understanding is here in Dubai, and therefore they started with the Dubai Student Wellbeing Census trial. After the trial, and when the data was shared with the 19 schools, we were invited to go to the KHDA, and we formed a reference group. And the data was explained to us by the people from the South Australian government. And we also went over some of the questions that were asked in the census, because some of the questions the students, they found very hard to answer. So some of the questions from the trial were changed, and they were not the same as the ones that 65,000 students answered in November of 2017. So what does the Dubai Student Wellbeing Census measure? Well, you get a lot of information about the demographics, which I consider to be a wealth of information which explains a lot about the students in your school. It tells you, for example, how students come to school, who lives with them at home, do they live in a villa, do they live in an apartment, how often do they see their parents, etc., etc. And then there is a section about, the well-being, and that's more like a summary about how the whole school is doing. One of the changes from the trial was that it was decided to look at students from grade 6 up to grade 9, because a lot of the primary students in grade 5 in the trial had difficulties with the questions. So that is a whole school summary. Then the other 4 aspects, they are more about the student social and emotional well-being. And those questions that were being asked is, do you worry a lot? Do you feel anxious? Are you worried about things in school? Are you worried about things that are happening at home? And then the fourth area is about relationships and learning in school and at home. So how do you feel connected to your teachers or to other adults in the school? How are your relationships with your peers? And victimization is also part of that 4th component. The 5th one is about physical health and lifestyle. And for us, that was very important because it tells us a lot of information about, students' sleep habits, nutrition, and exercise. And then the last one is after-school activities. So do students stay after school to engage in sports or other activities, for example, like, the Model United Nations debating clubs, or do-it-yourself workshops, etc. The November data is presented to us in a different way than the trial data. And so we can see in our own school how all the students are doing in the different areas, and how the Emirati students compare to all the students. And then we can compare that with all students in Dubai and all Emirati students in Dubai. The grade is also divided into how all the students are doing and how the boys and the girls are doing separately, and then we can compare that with the data for Dubai. So the Dubai Student Wellbeing Census gives us a wealth of information, and in some cases we were actually surprised because the data was not what we had expected it to be. So what we did after the trial was to put all that data in one big spreadsheet, and we asked students who were interested to join us in a committee to look at that data. And we had approximately 10 to 15 students from grade 6 up to grade 10 who are on a weekly basis still coming together to decide a way forward on how to improve student well-being in the school. We also started at the beginning of the academic year a parent committee, and we also showed them our data. And we did the same with the teachers. So at the start of the year, all the teachers had a look at the data, also the primary school teachers and the teachers who are teaching students in the high school. But we also formed a staff committee to look at the data and to find a way forward. So what did our committees see in the data, and what is it that they wanted to change in the school or to do in the school in order to improve student well-being? It was very interesting that actually all 3 committees wanted something totally different, which is absolutely fine with us because the overall aim, of course, is to improve student well-being. So the students were very much looking at school belonging and peer belonging. That to them was the most important thing. And they started to come up with ideas on how we could improve that. They felt that they were not always listened to and that they needed to have more student voice. And that was regarding academic matters, curriculum matters, but also about fun and bonding days. So we have more surveys now in the school just to ask the students for their feedback. And we also share with them, what the majority of them feel we could do in order to improve student well-being. So there were younger students who said that it wasn't fair that they were not represented in the student council. So we have changed that. And also a group of students felt that it was time to have a new school uniform. So they worked with our bursar and with the uniform school supplier on a new school uniform for the next academic year. The parents focused on victimization. And even though we as teachers didn't think that was something that was very concerning, parents, of course, always want their children to be safe in the school first. The data overall in Dubai, and what I learned from the people from the South Australian government, is actually that cyberbullying or cyber victimization is relatively low. But maybe because it's a new phenomenon, and maybe because it still makes the headlines in newspapers, that parents really focus on that. We have had in the past assemblies, we have had guest speakers. We feel that we don't have that many incidents in the school because we constantly speak to students about the challenges and the dangers to use social media. But the parents still felt that that was something very important for us to focus on. So we have organized information sessions for parents, and also for parents to learn what to do if your child comes home and says, you know, I'm being bullied, or my peers are not very nice to me when it comes to social media. So we are supporting the parents in that area by holding information sessions in the school, by having guest speakers. We have had several speakers from the Arabian Lighthouse. And we have also tried to improve our communication through Twitter and Instagram, because that's what the parents are using the most at the moment. So the Beth Committee are the phase leaders, our head of inclusion, the pastoral counselor, our moral education coordinator, and myself, and we get together fortnightly. We analyzed all the data, and we looked at what were the things we could fix quick with a high impact. We didn't want to have low effort, low impact. We really looked at what can we do per grade level, which is not going to take us a lot of time and effort, but which we consider to be quick fixes to have a high impact. We also looked at, you know, what are the things that will take time to improve. And so each phase leader with the homeroom teachers, they came up with a student wellbeing improvement plan, which we called the SWIP. And they started to teach in the MYP lessons certain skills to our students, depending on what the data had told them of the trial. We were lucky that at the start of the academic year, we had 4 colleagues, 2 from primary and 2 from secondary school, who attended a 4-day course by the Institute of Positive Education. And these are actually the people from the Geelong Grammar School in Australia, who have been a positive education school for the past 10 years. These 4 colleagues came back highly motivated, and they started to implement activities which were focused not only on student well-being, but also on teacher well-being. And some of them, they were, you know, very easy to do, but it really boosted staff morale. And it also made the teachers aware of how important this was if they would mimic some of those activities with their students. So because this was such a success, and because we felt in our senior leadership team that this was one of the best investments we had made regarding professional development, that we have asked the Institute of Positive Education to come back to our school in May of this year. And 30 people from our school, from primary and secondary, as well as some of not only our teachers, but also our learning assistants and maybe some administrators, that they have that training in May. And then we hope that we are going to continue training more of our staff in the fall of the next academic year. We have also done some in-house professional development. We have looked at the data. We have introduced teachers to positive education and to the International Positive Education Network. And we have introduced teachers to the work by Martin Seligman, Carol Dweck, and Angela Duckworth. And this is something that we keep on doing during the year. We had in February and March PD opportunities for our teachers regarding student well-being through appreciative inquiry. And that was actually a very good way to look at what we feel we are doing well, where we would like to go in the future, and how we think we can do that without losing momentum and with sustained motivation to improve student well-being in our school. So what we did is, when we looked at all that data, and everybody actually found something else. The students, they were interested in school belonging and peer belonging. The parents were looking at certain areas as well, and we were looking at areas what we could do per grade. There was a trend that the senior leadership team noticed, and that was that we actually noticed that our students think relatively highly of themselves, that their academic self-concept seemed to be heightened, and that they were actually saying, you know, I know I'm capable, and I also know how to be a good learner. However, you know what, my grades are not always what they should be, and I'm not always absorbed in my work. Now, on the slide, you see that it says May 2017, because it was very interesting when we did the well-being census in November, that students had a very different perception about their schoolwork. That was much more positive than it was in May. And the only explanation that we have is actually that, you know, maybe at the end of the school year, students look back and say, oops, you know, I could have done a better job. And that while in November, they are still pretty confident that their grades are going to be okay. So we wanted to verify if the Dubai Student Wellbeing Census data was accurate, although we were assured by the KHDA and by the South Australian government that this was a well-tested census. But we actually missed the fact that we did not have individual data for each student. The Dubai Student Wellbeing Census is giving us a lot of information, but unfortunately, we don't know how each individual student is doing. The reason why is that the KHDA says that they don't want to flag students who may have mental health concerns. They feel that that is not the purpose of the census, and that they feel that that should be done in the school, and that maybe schools, they should refer students to an educational psychologist or to a school counselor, but that's not the aim of the Dubai Student Wellbeing Census. Nevertheless, we wanted to know more how kids were doing individually. So we decided at the same day as the November Wellbeing Census was being administered in the school, we decided to offer the students the PASS, the Pupil's Attitudes to Self and School as well. Unlike the Dubai Student Wellbeing Census, which has many questions, this test is much shorter. There are 50 questions in total, which are divided over 9 attitudinal factors. And the ones in blue actually tell us what the students' attitudes towards self and school are. The green one is more the strategy or the skills, and the ones in red tells us more about the students' motivation. So we have 9 attitudinal factors, which gave us a lot of individual data on our students. So what does the PASS look into? We can see how the whole cohort is doing, but it's also divided by gender and by year group, by ethnic group. It's a little bit tricky for our school because we have a lot of students who only represent one nationality, so that's a lot of data that does not give us so much information. However, we can group them the same way as the Dubai Student Wellbeing Census by looking at how are all students doing compared to our Emirati cohort. We can look at the SEND students, EAL students, etc., etc. So at the bottom of this slide, you see a snapshot of our grade 6 class, which is year 7 in the UK. And it tells you how the kids are doing compared to these 9 different factors. So the student at the bottom, for example, feelings about school, it's a little problematic. It's not red, but it's not the color that we would like to see. General work ethic is very low. Attitudes to attendance and response to curriculum demands is also an area that this student can improve in with the support of his teachers. Now, I just want to make a quick side note, and that is that we do not share this information. We don't share the past data with our students or with their parents. And the reason why is that we feel that if we were to do the past again, that the parents would put pressure on the students that everything needs to be green. And we don't know if the test is then going to be very valid. This is information for us to see how our students are doing, how they are feeling, not what our perception is of our student well-being, but very much what the student thinks about themselves and the life at school. So when we looked at the whole cohort, and this was students from grade 6 to grade 9, and actually this is grade 6 to grade 10, we saw more or less the same pattern that we saw in our trial data. And also it looked very much the same as our November data. So our students' perceived learning capability, and that's how they feel about themselves as learners, is heightened. They are also saying that they are prepared for learning. They are saying that they have the skills to do the work. However, their self-regard, their self-esteem as a learner, as well as the response to the curriculum demands. So, in other words, are they motivated to do the work? Do they feel that they are being challenged? Do they feel that they are able to access the work? Is lower. Now, it's still all in the green, but we did have our concerns, especially when it comes to the general work ethic. And we looked at the students and how they were doing in grade 6 to grade 10 when it came to their general work ethic. And we were very pleased to see that even though it is relatively low in grade 6, when the students are getting older, their work ethic was increasing. And this turned out to be a trend that GL Education noticed, not only in Dubai, but actually in the Middle East and Asia, if I'm not mistaken, which was very different than what they see in the United Kingdom. So again, our kids are saying, you know, I know I'm capable and I also know how to be a good learner, but it is hard and I'm not always motivated to do so. Now, we were happy with, I know I'm capable and I know how to be a good learner. And learning is hard. That's a good thing as well. If it was very easy, then we are doing something wrong, because they need to have that challenge and they need to feel good about themselves and they need to look back and say, you know what, it was hard, but I asked for help, or I found answers myself, or I worked with a friend, and I am at the end successful. The last part, and I'm not motivated to do so, is something that we as a school are looking into. What can we do in order to motivate our students not to give up so quickly and to increase their perseverance and resilience? So what we did is we looked at the Dubai Student Wellbeing Census domains, the subdomains, and the past factors. And we were trying to line that up. And it's not an exact fit because the definitions are slightly different, and it's very difficult for us to say which questions go exactly where. The aim of the Dubai Student Wellbeing Census is also not exactly the same as that of the past. And that's why, you know, we feel at JBS that these two really complement each other. But we see the same pattern again, that the academic self-concept or their perceived learning capability is heightened. Their cognitive engagement, their willingness to do the work, or the preparedness for learning is heightened as well. But their self-regard, their self-esteem as a learner, and the response to the curriculum demands, we feel that our students give up quickly. So what we did with all that past data is we tried to put it in a spreadsheet. We wanted to see how the students' academic self-concept, or actually what in the past is called their perceived learning capability, how that was in relation to their CAT4 mean scores. So we came up with a scatter graph and then decided to make the Emirati students red and everybody else blue. And what we saw was a scatter graph that's on the slide that looks like it's all over the place. I just wanted to add that we had moved the x-axis up from 30 percentile up to 50 because we wanted to challenge our students a little bit more. But it looked like it was all over the place. And when we looked at the bottom quadrant on the right-hand side, we actually noticed that there were lots of students, well, 5, 6 students who were from Japan. So these students are doing well when it came to their CAT score, but their perceived learning capability was low. So we said maybe that's not fair because these are students who are EAL students. Could we actually change that scatter graph slightly by not focusing on their mean score, but just to have a look at how they are doing when it comes to their non-verbal. And actually then we got more kids in there, and some of our EAL students, they moved out of that quadrant. And so to quote John Hattie, it is very important to know your students, because this scatter graph, when we looked at it and with the cursor, we could look at each student. And so we had the name of that student. It gave us a lot of information. This student here is a student who is not able to access our curriculum, and she is on a special program. And there are lots of life skills that she is working on. She is doing grade 2 math at the moment. But at the top, we also have some students who are also our SENS students, who are lovely children and who find the curriculum also very hard, but they are enjoying themselves and are having a good time, and they use every opportunity to celebrate what they are doing well. So if we have a look at the scatter graph, then we actually say that the students at the right top corner are the students who we need to push. They are very likely to achieve their targets, and these are not necessarily the kids that we worry about, but these are the kids that, you know, are capable, and they know that they are capable, and we need to make sure that they are doing their work and that we get the most out of them. The students on this side are the students who are telling us, well, you know, my nonverbal may not be that high, but I know I'm very capable. And these are the students that the teachers, they need to coach. And these are the kids that you can ask, you know, what worked very well and what can you do to improve even better if. These are students who need a more balanced approach and mentoring. And some of the kids, we were actually surprised that they were in this quadrant, and we are going to do the pass again later in the year to see if they have moved out of this area. Our vulnerable learners are at the right bottom quadrant, and it's very important for the teachers to know who they are. These are the students who are capable, but who actually don't think of themselves as the capable learners. And so we need to encourage those students, and we need to give them a pat on the back. And these are also, not all of them, but some of these students are the students who have a fear of success. So again, it gives us a lot of very valuable information. And even though some of my colleagues question the reliability of the data, that really doesn't matter. What matters most is that we are having professional conversations at a subject teacher level, at a homeroom and phase leader level, and that we are having these conversations to help improve the teaching and learning. And that's what we feel is extremely valuable. Something that I got very much interested in was engagement flow. And that's an area that not only at JBS, but it looks like all schools in Dubai, according to the November data, can work on. So what our students are actually saying is it's hard for me to get really absorbed in my work. I'm easily distracted, and it's not that I do my schoolwork and I forget everything else around me. So I started to do some research and ended up with Dr. Csikszentmihalyi, who has a flow theory, which he actually came up with in the 1970s and early 80s. And it was very much based on how top athletes practice and perform at a high level. And if I can use the metaphor of me playing against Roger Federer, and you need to know that I am not a very good tennis player at all, that would then mean that my skill level is very low, and the challenge that I will have to play against him will be very high. And as a result, my anxiety levels will go through the roof, especially when he returns tennis balls with a tremendous speed. While Roger Federer, on the other hand, his skill set is very high. For him to play against me is going to be extremely boring, and he ends up here. And so the trick actually is for teachers to make sure that the skills set that the students have and the challenges that we offer them in a task allow the student to end up in this flow stream. And so what we did is we said, well, you know, if preparedness for learning is about the strategies and the skills that students have to do the work, and we say that the response to curriculum demands are the challenges that we give students in a task. And if we put all our kids in that scatter graph and then try to get that flow stream in there, then we actually see who our students are who feel levels of anxiety and who our students are who feel bored at times. And again, it's a conversational starter with teachers. Are you differentiating your lessons? Are students able to get into that flow? So Csikszentmihalyi's flow theory is actually saying that the task should have clear goals and rules. So the student should know beforehand what the outcome is going to be, what the goal is going to be of the task. It needs to be meaningful and relevant for the student as well. Why am I learning this? Why do I have to do this? Why are these skills and content and concepts important for me to be able to reach that goal? And so the balance between the skills and the challenge need to be such that that student can get into the flow. They also need to get enough time to complete the task. If they have too much time, they will be bored. If they have too little time, they will be nervous because they feel that they are not able to finish the task on time. Students also need to feel that they are in control. And of course, they get that feeling much better when they know that they can do the work within the time given and that they also know what they need to do and why they need to do it. There should be a way for students to be able to concentrate. And when I do lesson observations, unfortunately, it doesn't happen all the time. We teachers tend to talk quite a lot. And teachers at times, they stop the entire lesson because they see that one or two students find something very challenging and are actually stuck. But there are enough students who are actually working on the task. And so to stop the class and to have everyone listen to an explanation which may not apply for half or more than half of the students, it breaks that concentration pattern for a lot of kids. So at JBS, we are working now on teacher talk that should not be more than 20% of the lesson, so students can concentrate. And then the last bullet point that Csikszentmihalyi came up with was, a student should be able, while working on the task, getting feedback. And it can be feedback from the teacher, it can be feedback from a peer, but it can also be the feedback that the student gives to him or herself when they know what is expected of them and they know how the task is going to be assessed. So the flow theory doesn't only work with sports, it also works with every task that we do in life. So that was the task. What are the ingredients of a good task? And then we also looked at the skills. And in the MYP, there are approaches to learning skills, which are divided into 5 ATL skill categories, and they are divided into skill clusters. And each skill cluster has its own skill indicators. And it sounds very complicated, but actually what a teacher is expected to do in a task is to link a skill indicator with the object of the lesson in an activity. So the student is doing an activity, is practicing that particular skill in order to do well in that objective strength. And the MYP aim is that teachers teach these skills explicitly. However, I think that we can do a better job at it, and I'm not talking about my own school, I'm also talking about other MYP schools in the region that I visit for the IB as a consultant, and I think that we as educators assume too often that a student knows how to do a certain thing. For example, kids are supposed to work in groups, but do we really teach them collaboration skills? Students are expected to do research, but do we break down those research skills and do we explicitly teach these skills to students? Very often we don't do it. And then we could save ourselves a lot of time is when we horizontally and vertically, plan those skills in such a way that students going from grade 6 all the way up to grade 10, these skills become more and more difficult. And so whatever they do in grade 6, if it is a language and literature, or if it's a PE class, or it's a science class, that skill that is being taught is exactly the same. That will save the teachers a lot of time, and that will save the students a lot of anxiety as well. I have highlighted here, or put a big red circle around it, the affective skills. And that MYP skill cluster is divided into into 5 skill indicators, and that's to teach students mindfulness, perseverance, emotional management, self-motivation, and resilience. And the question that I have asked teachers is, and how do you do that? And of course, we actually don't. And I think that my school is not very different than the schools that you work in, and that it's only since a couple of years ago that more schools are looking into mindfulness and teaching students that it's okay to fail, but that they need to learn how to bounce back. So positive education helps teachers and students to focus on the effective skills, which fall into the self-management category much more. So at JBS, while we were looking at all that data, we were asking ourselves, and now what? What are the ways forward? And we really feel that we need to get the parents on board, and all that information from the Dubai Student Wellbeing Census tells us that we cannot do this without our parents. And this is like a cultural shift, and it may take quite some time before we get there. But you can see in this bar graph from our November Wellbeing Census data that our students are not doing very well when it comes to sleep. And our Emirati students at JBS are really not doing very well when it comes to sleep. But actually, if you look at all of Dubai, the red bar is pretty high, and that of Emirati students is even a little bit higher. The other issue we have, or area that we think we can improve upon is nutrition and the understanding of nutrition and how it encourages student well-being. The same with exercise, the use of social media, and are parents really active listeners? And students very often tell us that parents are on their mobile phones as well, and that parents not always have the time to listen to their concerns. So we want to invite more guest speakers in the school. We are thinking of having a guest speaker on every other month or maybe on a monthly basis because our parents, as we have learned, tend to come to school when it is someone who is not a teacher in the school. We may share the same information with them, but if it is someone who is an educational psychologist, if it is someone who can give them tips and hints on mindful parenting, then they tend to come to school more. So we feel that we really need to provide that to our parents. Our Student Wellbeing Committee of volunteer parents is also looking into how they can reach more parents and make them more aware of the fact that it's important that kids go to bed on time, that they get their 8 to 10 hours a night, that they turn off their phones and their iPads, et cetera, that they do exercise. As I said before, it's going to be a long way, but we are confident that eventually we can make a change. We also want to do more for our students. This academic year, we will continue with the well-being in our MYP lessons, which at the moment are fortnightly. We are continuing with increasing our student voice and distributive leadership. The Student Council is working on a new constitution, and we are sharing with our students the Dubai Student Wellbeing Census data. And the kids there are actually surprised about some of that data as well, and other data they're not surprised about at all. But it's good for them, to have a look at it and to feel that this is about them and that we want them to feel better. We also feel that we have to have higher expectations when it comes to the students. And this is something that Angela Duckworth in her book Grit is very much advocating. So we want our students to be on time. That's not always very easy. We don't want phones in classrooms anymore, even though they are not allowed to use them. We don't want them to have them in their pockets. We feel that it's very distracting, even when that phone is in a pocket. When there is a vibration, everybody has the tendency to look at that phone. And we also want our students to take more pride in their uniform, especially next year, because that's the uniform that they have chosen. So after the spring break, we are planning to have one vertical homeroom of student volunteers. That's a homeroom class of 3 students per grade level, from grade 6 up to grade 11, because the grade 12s will sit their diploma exams. And we are hoping that that vertical homeroom will improve to be on time in the morning, that the older students can be role models for the younger students, can support them when they are worried or stressed about certain things that they need to do, but also that the younger kids can hold the older students accountable for not breaking school rules. So that's a trial that we have in the upcoming term. We also have spoken to our school cafeteria, and because a lot of our kids come to school without breakfast, we are going to offer the possibility to have breakfast at 7:15, before half an hour before lessons start. The only thing that we are a little bit worried about is that if they all come late, then that breakfast club is not going to be a success. But we're going to try that after the holiday as well. So if our trials go well, then there will be vertical homerooms for all students in the next academic year. And then we hope, with the support of the Institute of Positive Education in Australia, to have positive education lessons next academic year, and they will be on a weekly basis. We want to have activities with the students. We don't want to have worksheets that they need to fill out, but we want to have positive education lessons which will help students with some of the aspects which they find challenging, as we know from the past and the Dubai Student Wellbeing Census. So the teachers as well, positive education, well-being and achievement is going to be key. We are investing a lot of money in professional development, and that is because we feel that it's important that teachers understand the importance of well-being as well. We don't want teachers to say anymore that students in Dubai are lazy or that they are privileged and that they give up very quickly. These are things that we don't want to hear in the school anymore. We want teachers to have a growth mindset as well, so that they can make a change. It's important that everybody knows their students. We have CAT 4 data. We have PASS data on each and every student. We're going to have progress data for English, Maths and Science very soon as well. And so all of this will be on the class context sheet, so the teachers can really focus on the development of the curriculum and how that needs to be differentiated in order to support each and every student. Engagement flow is another area that we really want to focus on. And even though it's part of the MYP philosophy of teaching backwards, this is something that we are going to explicitly ask teachers to show us before they teach the unit. And so we really know that it is taking place. So that means that we're going to hold our subject leaders and our curriculum coordinators more accountable for what is really happening in lessons. So it is important that there is going to be a right balance between skills and challenge for each student. And then the other thing, again, also part of the MYP, but we are not always doing it consistently, is that all these skills need to be taught explicitly to students. So it is quite a lot that we want to do, and we know that it will take some time. But the most important thing is that we know that we are going to do this together as a community of parents, teachers, administrators, and students. So this was the end of my talk. I've been talking for 15 minutes now, and I hope that people do have some questions.